Canada is preparing for a significant increase in traffic at its border with the United States starting August 9th. That's when fully vaccinated Americans will be allowed to enter without having to quarantine. But the people who work at the border are contemplating job action. Will that lead to a rough reopening with long wait times? Dominic LeBlanc is Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. He's in Moncton, New Brunswick. Minister LeBlanc, welcome back to the show.
Good evening, David.
So the plan right now is to open the Canada-U.S. land border on the 9th of August. But in the backdrop of all of this is an outstanding labor dispute with more than 8,000 border services officers who could be in a strike position by the first week of August. So how could that affect your reopening plan?
We're obviously concerned about that. Our colleague Bill Blair has updated the Cabinet COVID Committee from time to time on those discussions. We're obviously hopeful that the government can arrive at a negotiated solution with these Canada Border Services agents. But we'll ensure, we have an obligation, obviously, to ensure the safety of Canada's borders. And we have an obligation, particularly in the context where the government has decided to evolve these border measures, to ensure that operationally we're ready to do so. So we're very confident that the operational plan that the Border Services Agency has offered to the government is robust, but we're not insensitive or uninterested in those labor negotiations and those discussions, and we're hopeful that we can arrive at the appropriate settlement before that would even be an issue.
I would presume, sir, that most of these, or a lot of these members would be considered essential workers because of the nature of the work they do in protecting the border. Have you got a sense of what percentage of the workforce would be required to stay on the job should this result in job action?
To be honest, no, David, it's a good question. I'm not familiar with the details in terms of the applicable Canada Labour Code legislation to that particular organization, the Border Services Agency. But you're right, the country cannot be in a position where we have insecure borders or where the government can't fulfill its fundamental obligation to protect Canadians. So any of the contingency planning that we've been briefed on certainly reassures us that the Border Services Agency will continue to fulfill their responsibilities. But we recognize, certainly as a government and as the employer, that we need to make the best efforts to arrive at a negotiated settlement that's fair both to the workers who do a terrific job. These men and women are literally on the front lines of protecting Canadians. And were last spring, when COVID-19 first became the issue that obviously it's become, these men and women were still on duty. They were still working at airports, at border crossings, when plane loads of people were being repatriated to Canada. So the government's not insensitive at all, David, to the phenomenal work they've done. I've had a chance to be briefed by a number of officials from the Border Services Agency at the COVID Cabinet Committee. And every single time we've been impressed by the work they do, the planning they do. So I think the government will hopefully find at the right moment the fair and reasonable outcome in a negotiated way. That's obviously much more positive than some job action or some strike action or other circumstance.
Even if there is no job action, there has been an increase in the processing time at the border because of the requirement to check vaccination and the enhanced screening measures. That has gone from about 32 seconds per vehicle at the land border before the pandemic up to 5 minutes now. That's likely to increase if you open up to U.S. travelers and increase your volumes. So what measures are you going to take there to try to streamline the processing times?
Again, critical question, and it's one that the Cabinet and the COVID Committee of Cabinet has looked at a number of times. We know that the Border Services Agency has done a series of operational exercises to ensure both at the land borders, as you said, but at airports as well, they're in a position to accommodate the increased volume. We expect a significant increase in volume, as you noted. That's one of the reasons, David, why it is the 9th of August for the Canada-U.S. border, as opposed to August 2nd or August 3rd or the long weekend in August, deliberately because the Border Services Agency asked that they have time to prepare for the operational ramp up. One of the things we think that may also be helpful in regard to not allowing the wait times to become very unreasonable would be the fact that fully vaccinated travelers now will be subject to random testing at the point of arrival as opposed to an obligatory testing previously. But we're confident that the authorities have the right operational plan in place and will be ready. But I think if we look at European countries and other jurisdictions that have seen sudden increases in visitors and travelers, there have been increased delays. So we're not naive to think it's going to go down to 32 seconds per person at the land border, but we're conscious to do everything we possibly can to ensure that it's reasonable for visitors.
I know this was discussed with the provinces last Thursday when the Prime Minister outlined to the other First Ministers what the border plan would be. We've heard over the past several months frustration from Premier Ford in Ontario on the need to bring in tighter border restrictions, not just getting rid of not getting rid of hotel quarantines as you're doing, but actually bring them in on the land borders. Did you get any pushback from Premier Ford when the Prime Minister rolled out this plan to the premiers, and have you had any pushback from Ontario since?
No, frankly, we've had a very collaborative and constructive exchange with the Government of Ontario over the last number of weeks, both with the measures we brought in on July 5th and as we get ready for these further measures on August 9th and then other international arrivals in early September. I had a conversation. I called Premier Ford after the First Minister's call last Thursday, and I know my colleague Marco Mendicino was working hard on the national interest exemption, which allowed the Blue Jays to play their home game in Toronto on the 30th of July. So the discussion has been very collaborative. And frankly, the premiers agreed with what the Prime Minister laid out as this phased approach, starting with fully vaccinated Americans, then moving to other international vaccinated travelers. So I think there was an easy consensus, certainly in the call last Thursday. And Premier Ford has been very constructive as we've been making these plans.
One other topic, if I may, Minister, you spearheaded the process to pick the new Governor General, Mary Simon. I'm sure you're aware there have been about 400 complaints to the Official Languages Commissioner that she does not speak French, and the Commissioner has launched a formal investigation into the process for the appointment of Ms. Simon. Do you have any thoughts on that? What's your reaction to the news that the Commissioner is going to be digging into this?
So we've obviously taken note of the Commissioner's decision. He's certainly within his right to look at these issues, and if he has questions or wants information on the process, of course, we'll be happy. Privy Council office will be happy to work with Commissioner Théberge's office. Madame Simon and the Prime Minister were very clear when her appointment was announced. When she was growing up in Quebec, in Nunavik, in northern Quebec, she was deprived of the right to attend French schools, to learn French. She went to a federal day school, which only offered students classes in English. She's committed. She certainly recognizes the importance of official bilingualism. Rideau Hall will continue as an institution, of course, to be absolutely bilingual in both official languages. And she's also committed herself to improving her ability to communicate in French. So we think Canadians will quickly see the enormous human qualities that we believe she'll bring to the job. We're very proud of that appointment. But it is a reality of that period in Quebec history that French language classes weren't available, although we're very confident that her French will improve quickly once she assumes the function, and she'll be able to communicate with Canadians in both official languages.
What kind of authority does the Commissioner have here? He says he's going to investigate the Privy Council office, but the PCO makes non-binding advice to the Prime Minister, who then passes it on to the Queen, right? So I don't think the Queen is bound by the Official Languages Act and who she chooses to accept and appoint as her representative to the country. So, you know, how meaningful can this investigation be when ultimately this is a decision that rests with someone who's outside the jurisdiction of the Commissioner?
So, I mean, the Commissioner obviously has broad discretion to commence investigations or to examine issues around the Official Languages Act. We understand that. We think Commissioner Théberge is doing a good job. And if he decides to look at this process, as I said, we're certainly happy to collaborate with him. But there's no mystery here. the Prime Minister recommended an outstanding Canadian to fulfill this function, the first Indigenous person to occupy the office of Governor General at obviously a very significant moment in the history of our country. And we're very proud of Ms. Simon's record of service to the country. And we also think that Canadians will quickly get to know somebody who will be an exceptional Governor General. And she has herself acknowledged the importance of quickly expanding her ability to communicate in French.
Did you anticipate these complaints, sir? And are you worried these complaints in the investigation may tarnish the appointment in some way?
We're not worried about Ms. Simon's appointment being tarnished because we think as she assumes the function next week, Canadians will see what an outstanding Canadian she really is, her own record of service. This, David, is somebody who received l'Ordre National du Québec 30 years ago for having been one of the key architects of the James Bay agreements, which in many ways were amongst the first modern treaties in Canadian history with the Inuit populations in northern Quebec and with the Cree. So her record of understanding both the reality of Quebec and Francophone Canada is real. So her record of service speaks for itself, and we think Canadians will get to know an outstanding woman who will be one of the great governors general.
But do you, Minister, as a Francophone yourself, do you appreciate these concerns that people are raising about this?
As an Acadian or a Francophone outside Quebec, we're obviously sensitive to this reality. As I said, we fully respect Commissioner Raymond Théberge's role and his ability to do his job. But we also think that Ms. Simon's appointment is an outstanding one for Canada. And at this particular moment in the history of our country, we think she is the right person to assume this role. And we think Canadians will come to really appreciate what she can offer the country.
Okay, Minister Dominic LeBlanc, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, David. Have a great evening.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.